We're in my workshop, and I bought this house about 3 years ago. The only requisite I had was that it had to be 3 bays, so I could take one of the bays and convert it to a workshop. One of the great things about wood turning, and there's many good things about wood turning in my opinion, is you don't need a lot of heavy-duty machinery, expensive, to produce the product, and you don't need a lot of room. You need a lathe, you need something to sharpen your tools with. In this case, I've got a belt sharpener from Sorby. You have to have a dust extractor for sanding, but I also use it to pick up shavings. And real important when you're power sanding, you need to have an air filtration system. Other than that, some good lighting and the tools. Now, people think you need a lot of tools. All of my work is done with 4 tools. They're all bowl gouges. And I found that for anything I want to do, they work fine. I'm turning on a Powermatic, 2 horsepower, which for my purposes works very well. And I turn between centers to start off with, and then I'll slide the tailstock off, bring the work forward, move the headstock, and I'll turn off the end. The big reason I bought this lathe is because you can turn off the end. I don't like to do the inside of the bowl, especially when you're finished turning and you're leaning over the ways of the bed. Try to get that left side of the bowl. This way I just slide it off the end. And when I'm turning, and I'm tall and my back is not the best shape, so it's easier for me standing right in front. So that's what I do. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this bowl blank between centers. Now, something real important to remember. This blank probably weighs about 40 pounds right now. I'm going to have it spinning as we get closer to the end process, 800-900 RPM, which is pretty quick. So my point is, this is heavy, and you've got to make sure it's really secured on the lathe well.
Have you ever had one come off?
Yes. The scar across the bridge of my nose will attest to that. When I started turning, especially wet turning, smaller pieces, and then moved to bigger pieces, I would wear the little safety glasses, no more. When you're doing work like this, what you really need is you need a full face shield, just to be on the safe side. Because when you're turning, a piece of bark comes off, it hits you in the chin or the cheek, it startles you, you lose concentration, your tool digs in, you got to catch, you lose it. Anything can happen. So, full face shield. So the question is, now, how do you attach this blank between centers? And I've seen it done many ways. I've seen it done with a face plate. I've seen it done with a spur drive. I've seen it done with glue blocks. There's many ways. The thing that's important, I think, to remember here is whatever method you use to attach the blank to your lathe, make sure that it's safe. And that really applies to anything you're doing. There are a lot of different ways to turn a bowl and to wet turn a bowl. And I'm sure if you've done it for a while, you use what's easiest and works best for you. But the one caveat always is be safe, okay? You can't afford to break fingers, break your nose, and especially, run the risk of losing an eye.
Yeah.
So, what we're going to do to attach this blank to the lathe is we're going to start off, and I've used all different methods, but I keep coming back to this method here. Now, this is a face plate ring. And remember I said we marked the middle of that blank when we scribed it. So now I set this faceplate ring with a dot in the middle, and I've got roughly the center of this blank. So the question is now, how do we attach it? There's different theories out there what kind of screws you should be using. Most people will say wood screws. I've used all kinds of screws. Right now what I'm doing is I'm using some hardened steel wood screws that another turner gave to me, and that's what I'm going to use to attach the faceplate ring to the wood. I've got 6 holes here. Someone will say, well, you need all 6 screws in. Not necessarily. It depends on how secure the ring is going to be, how big the piece is, how out of round it may be, the weight, and a number of factors. We're in pretty good shape here for all of that. So I'm going to use 3 wood screws, and what I'm going to do is attach the faceplate ring there. The one thing that I bump into now and then that causes a problem, especially with the wet wood and longer screws, is you can get them in, the screws, fairly snug, and they really grip the faceplate ring and the ring to the wood. Sometimes you can't get them out.
I was wondering.
And it creates a real problem and a lot of frustration. And I do it every now and then. So sometimes if I've got a screw that's too long, what I may do is put a bolt or a washer underneath it. I'm going to go ahead and try these. But when I seat them in here, they've got to be in fairly snug. And there's a secret to getting them out, and we'll talk about that as we get to it. Use a pilot hole. Some people won't do that, but I like to do it. It helps get the screws in nice and snug, and I can pretty much know that I can get them out.
Let's break bits. And you've probably learned which woods hold on better than others.
Yeah, after you do this for a while, you know, you learn the characteristics of the woods that you're working with. One of the things I wanted to mention with the faceplate ring, or any faceplate, once you attach it to your piece of wood, it's there. You know, so if you encounter anywhere on this blank, say you all of a sudden see a check or a crack or something you want to get rid of, the only thing you can do is continue to turn the piece to try to turn it out, and your bowl is getting smaller, smaller, smaller. Now, if I use a spur drive, and I've seen some wood turners do it, they'll take a spade bit, drill the hole, put this in, ram this up really tight and tighten it. So now you're at a single point here. So now if you come across something that you want to get rid of, you can either lift or drop the wood a little bit from your tailstock side and turn it out. Okay? Here you're committed. What I'm going to do is attach this to my chuck. And for what I do, you simply cannot be without a good 4-jaw scroll chuck. Over the years, I've tried different chucks, different brands, what have you. Most of them are pretty good. Some of them are excellent. This is an Axminster chuck that I've been using now for several years and find it to be very suitable for my needs. So what I'm going to do, if you look at this faceplate ring, it has a little ledge or lip on the inside. And you want to take this and you want to set it on the jaws, and then what you want to do is simply turn the jaws out, and you want it to rest on that lip, but you also want it to be tight this way. Now, to help me out a little bit, what I'll do is I'll bring this forward, tighten it just a skosh. I'll loosen it just a tad. Okay, make sure it's in there. Looks good. And then what I'll do now, let's tighten that.
So is there any way to test that once you've got it on there? Or
Yeah.
turn it on?
Yeah. You just have to make sure that the inside of the faceplate ring is seated properly against the outside edge of your
scroll chuck.
So now we've got it on. Looks good. But before we turn it on, okay, want to bring our tailstock up. Make sure we're down tight. Lock it. Word of caution, always, this is variable speed, and I left the speed where I was turning last, so you can see it's pretty high. I want to always double check, bring it down. I bring it down to 0. I turn the lathe on. The lathe is on now. Now I'll slowly ramp it up. Now the question is, well, how fast do you go? I like to turn fast, but not so fast that your lathe is really vibrating. That's not good. Now, when you start turning and it comes in, the bowl blank comes into round, you can turn faster because the piece on the lathe is in round and you don't get that vibration. So someone will say, well, how do you judge that, you know, how fast? And I tend to do this. I've got a nice light here, it's attached to my headstock, and I look at the bottom rim and I determine my speed by how much that shade on that light is vibrating. Now I'm up to 340 to start. That's pretty good actually. So that means that we did a pretty good job cutting this with a chainsaw, okay, and it's in round. So we're all locked down nice and tight. Headstock, tailstock, we're screwed in tight, so we're pressing the wood in. We've got our banjo and our tool rest locked tight. Now what I will do to start off with, and this is only to start off with, is I'll wear a glove in my left hand when I'm wet turning, rough turning, when I'm holding the tool, because that's closest to the piece of wood, and you have wood sometimes break off, bark, what have you, and you're going to get hit generally in this hand. So I'll start rough turning with this. I'll never wear a glove on my right hand. Your right hand, your arm, this is your power right here, and I really want a good firm grip. I want to know where I'm at. The glove doesn't necessarily tell you that. So most turners will use a bench grinder with stones. I started off that way. By sheer accident, I discovered a Sorby belt sharpener. I find it easier, quicker, cleaner, and the belts are probably $17, $18. They last forever. Stones are pretty expensive, and they don't last forever, and they make a mess. So I've got it set up. It's a really kind of a two-step process. I measure the length where I want my little jig to go, right here, and then I've got 3 holes which tell me at the angle that I want to sharpen it. Now the most important thing when you're sharpening, once you have the angle on your tool, you see the bevel? In my opinion, the most important thing is when you're turning, you want to repeat that bevel shape, that angle precisely every time that you sharpen your tool. Okay? And if you can do that freehand, I take my hat off to you, I really do. But most people use most turners use some sort of a jig. So this is what I'm using. Now you can see that we've taken all the debris off the outside. Nice shiny surface, your bevel, and it's at that same angle. And it makes a lot of difference when you're turning, because I want to spend my time here turning, not
How often
sharpening.
do you have to sharpen?
You know, it depends on a number of factors. Number one, first of all, the wood. If you've got something really dense and somewhat brittle, especially when you're finished turning, you'll sharpen a lot. Wet turning doesn't make that much difference because you're not looking for a pristine surface here. The objective here is to get a rough bowl shape quickly. You've seen I've got 6 more logs out there. I've got to cut. That's 12 more bolts.
Yeah.
So, and while they're sitting there, the ends are drying out of those logs and they're chucking. So the idea is get on it quick, and rough turn it. So the emphasis here is on speed, but also safety. You can't forget that. So safety and speed, get it off, get it to your rough shape, and then go out and start the other one. Now, what I will do is I generally will start on the end, because it comes this way. You want to be cutting uphill, up against grain. So I'll start and work this way. And then when I've done that, I'll attack the bottom. And before I cut the foot or the spigot to reverse it, I'll true up this surface as well. One of the ways you can tell that you did a pretty good job with your chainsaw and cutting the wood is you can see we're a little low here, we're a little high there. If this was on a spur drive, I probably adjusted at the tailstock, but we're not that far off. So I'll keep working now, but I'll take more from the bottom. We're pretty good up here for the time being. Here's a nice cross section that you can see. You've got on the outside, you've got a couple layers here. You've got the bark of the tree. Then you have the cadmium layer, which is kind of like a spongy layer with a lot of fiber, clogs the end of your tool. And then you hit the sapwood. So now we've got a general shape here. But what I want to do is refine the outside shape. Get it nice and cylindrical, and it's not yet. So, excuse me, if you look at what we've got, you can already see here, how this is going to be shaped. Now, a couple of things you can do to make sure that you've got it nice and round and a flat surface. You can notice when you're cutting, especially if you've got a lighter tool. If the tool is still bouncing around a little bit, you've got work to do. If it's running fairly smooth and steady, you're getting closer. Plus, when you turn your lathe on, you can always look down, and you can see actually that piece of wood, if it's got a little shadow or it's doing a little vibration. That means it's not totally in round yet. When it's totally round, there's a solid, smooth, steady line there. No vibration, no shadow. So we've got some work to do. I'm going to take a little bit off the bottom again, work on that, and then we'll move to the top. One thing you want to remember when you cut your spigot, if it's too big, you can always work with that. If it's too small, you're screwed. Yeah. Of course, you've got to go back and recut this, and we don't want to do that. So roughly what I'm trying to do is just it can be done many ways, and you can use different tools to do it. I found the best way that I like to use it to cut that spigot is I use a spindle gouge, and people will say you're crazy. Remember what I said earlier, whatever works for you as long as it's safe. Okay, so now we've got our spigot there. This is the base. Snap this out of the faceplate ring. So we'll just so we've loosened that. Okay, so here's our ring. We turn this around so we can take the inside of the bowl out, and all we have to do is put the spigot, seat it in the jaws of the chuck. It's probably a little big, but we can still work with that. So now we want to push forward. We want to make sure that the jaws of the chuck are seated on the spigot. The spigot goes snug up against the top and on the sides, and then you can just simply go in and tighten that down. Good. That lifts the tool right where you did that. Release the headstock. Generally, they'll say if the bowl is 12 inches in diameter, for example, you want to leave your wall thickness when you're wet turning about 10% of that. So a little over an inch. I tend to err on the more is better. Is you're hitting the outside of the bowl now, the sapwood region, so you see the white sapwood coming through, so you know you're not too far away. We probably got, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch there, and we're where we need to be. This bowl has very high moisture content right now. It's wet wood, obviously. (38% moisture). 38–40% moisture when it needs to air dry down to about 6%. But the challenge you have, if you take this and just set it on a shelf, the moisture will probably come out of the wood so quickly that it will check or crack the wood. So you need to slow down the rate at which that moisture leaves the wood. So how do you do that? Well, there's a product out there, a green wood sealer called Anchor Seal. All it is wax, really. And you coat your bowl in that. What I will do, just as a general indicator of when I did this, I'll put a date on it. What's the date? 9th?
I think it's the 11th. 12th.
Where does the time go, huh?
Yeah, we're both a week off.
So I'll just date that for future reference. I don't write the name of the wood, obviously, because I know what it is, but you can see why I like to turn Indian rosewood. I mean, it's got beautiful figure, beautiful color. It's a nice contrast between the white or blonde sapwood and the darker heartwood. And when you finish turning this and you get a nice finish on it, and you take it to a craft fair to sell, the first thing that the average customer will see or gravitate to is not the shape of the bowl, obviously. It's the color and the figure. That's what catches their eye. But you have to remember when it comes to wood turning, and that is the wood itself over time will fade. And after several years exposed to the light and continuous use, the grain, the color, the figure, not the grain, but the figure, the color will start to fade. I mean, 50 years from now, this could be almost a dull gray. Over time, it could possibly even go to a black. If you look at pictures of old wood turning, especially Tureen from the UK. Even though it was done in fairly light wood to begin with, it's like a chocolate brown, because over time it does that. So what does that tell you? It tells me that the single most important or the most redeeming quality of any bowl is not the figure and the color, kind of the glitz and the glance. It's really the shape. Because if the wood is dry and you turn it, finish turning it when it's dry, the one redeeming quality is going to be the shape of the bowl, not the figure, not the color. That will go with time, but the shape will always be there. So your focus really is on creating that perfect shape that's balanced and feels good in your hands. That's what I strive to do. I haven't got there yet, but I continue to do that. I try to do that with every bowl I turn. So what we're going to do now is we're going to mop on some of this green wood sealer, and then after we do that, then what we'll do is we'll set this bowl aside for a day or two, let the wax dry, and then I will bring the bowl inside and put it on a table for the next 6 or 8 months. There are many different ways to dry wood. One of the most frustrating parts of wood turning for me is turning green wood, and you've got everything perfect the way you want it. You set it aside, and in a couple of months you start developing checks or cracks, generally emanating from where the pith was or on the side grain. That's very frustrating when you think about the time, the work, the effort that got you to that point. So drying a wet turn bowl where it doesn't check or crack is as much an art as it is a science. I've tried many different ways, but I keep coming back to this way. And so what I'll do now is I'll just simply really coat this. What you want to keep in mind is don't go sparingly with the wax emulsion, especially on the end grain of your bowl. Go ahead and get it on as thick as you can. The main thing is you're covering all the wood surfaces of the bowl, all the outside surface. See, the pith was right down here. Can you see this faint mark here? Right there at the tip of it? Yep. That's a little bit of a check. You don't want that expanding, so I want to keep an eye on that. If it starts to open up, I'll use a little CA glue with a very thin viscosity like water to run that in there, but I'll keep an eye on that. It's not showing on the inside, just on the top a little bit, which is good. If I had caught that when I was rough turning, I'd have probably just turned that off, but it's there now, and it is what it is.
So we went from a log to the wet turned. Maybe Dave will let us come back when he finished turns one. But thanks a lot for showing us the whole process. If you want to get a finished bowl from Dave, go to Artisan Wood Turning LLC on Facebook. And if you have any problems with that, I'll post a link below in the description. So Dave is a great craftsman with the bowls, and they last a lifetime. I heard you say before they're kind of like a family heirloom.
They are. I mean, if you buy one of my bowls and you take care of it, and under usual wear and tear conditions, I guarantee them for life. So, you know, you could end up with a family heirloom that can last forever, ostensibly. I mean, I have several bowls I turned 30 years ago that we use to this day. So I would caution you that some of the Arizona hardwoods, particularly the woods like in the mesquite family, are very dense and brittle, and they can be a little heavy. So I try to turn them thin enough so they don't hurt your wrist when you pick them up. They're not that heavy. But if you drop them on a concrete floor or a tile floor or ceramic floor, what have you, chances are they will crack or break. So if you have a big one, it's a little heavy, be careful in the kitchen with wet hands that you don't lose it.
Well, thanks again, Dave.
All righty, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe to the channel.